So now we will introduce you on the setup and switching on of the PB980 ventilator, which is an upgrade from the previous PB840 ventilator that we introduced earlier. Before we switch on the ventilator, I'll introduce to you the breathing circuit. So here you have the Y connector that is connected nearest to the patient, and on the other ends are the inspiratory and expiratory tubings. First, you have to insert this expiratory filtration system over here. So to do that, make sure this is lifted up. You remove the hood over here, and this should fit quite nicely. Make sure it's closed all the way in before you release the catch completely, and it should be quite secure. The next part is then to attach the expiratory tubing into this expiratory port and the inspiratory tubing over here at the inspiratory port. So once this is done, you can then switch on the ventilator, but before that, make sure you remove the Y connector first over here. Once it's removed, then you can switch on the ventilator over here. So it will take some time for the ventilator to power up. In the meantime, I can introduce you something that the PB980 allows us to do, which is to monitor end-tidal CO2. So the device we use to monitor end-tidal CO2 is this one here. This will go onto the patient, the breathing circuit. This is where you have to connect it to the ventilator first, and to connect it to the ventilator, you open this catch over here.
So to connect the cable, you open the door as such. Over there you will see a CO2 label, and on the end of the cable you will have a double-sided arrow. You can slot it in and you should hear a click sound. Then the next is to look at the screen and to wait for the CO2 sensor to warm up. After that, you can zero the CO2 sensor and then connect the CO2 monitor to the HME filter as such. And next is to connect it to a closed suction catheter.
So now you see that the ventilator has already started up. First, we need to do the short self-test, or the SST test. So this is where you can initiate the SST. And again, like the 840, you have a whole row of tests that will need to be done. And all the instructions you can actually follow here in yellow. So it says to run SST, touch run all. So you can just click on run all and then press accept to confirm beginning SST. Now, before you start the SST, you'll be instructed to enter this. So for the purposes of this demonstration, we will do adult circuit and HME. Yep. So this is the first step. It says to connect the circuit with inspiratory filter and without humidifier, which has already been done. So you can accept. And then the SST test will be initiated. So the next step is they told you to block the Y, which is over here. So you block it up and press accept. So you can, the time that is needed for the SST is indicated over here. So it's about slightly over 3 minutes. So in the meantime, I introduce you to some of the interface and the buttons here. So like the 840, you have this knob here where you can turn to adjust ventilator settings. From left to right, you have things like you can change the brightness of the screen, to lock the screen, to change the volume of the alarms. This is to do manual inspiration. And these two are actually the inspiratory and expiratory pause maneuvers that we introduced earlier on the 840. And here is to reset the alarms and to silence the alarms. So here you are then instructed to disconnect the circuit at the aspiration filter. So this again is where you disconnect at the aspiration filter. So once you have disconnected, you can press accept. And then you are instructed to reconnect the circuit at the aspiratory filter. So reconnect it over here. And at this point of time, although it's not reminded over here, we usually attach a HME filter at this point of time to the patient end of the breathing circuit. And once you're done, you press accept. Okay, then the next step is to unblock the Y. So after you unblocked it, again press accept. And then the last part is to block the Y, as mentioned over here, and you press accept again. So the final step, unblock the Y, and press this. And this should be the last stage of the... So once you're done over here, you can then go on to your patient setup where you can adjust the ventilator settings. So this is where you pick to go on to patient setup. So once you're done with the SST, then you can go on to initiate the ventilator settings. So to do that, you click on new patient. And over here, you have to enter the patient's gender as well as height. So over here, assuming this is a male patient and of a height of 152, you can change the height by rotating the knob over here. And then the ideal body weight is actually reflected over the left side as well. So then you can go on to also choose your ventilator type. In this case, we'll be talking about invasive. We'll assume that we want sys control, volume control for this patient. But if you want to change, you can always change it over by using the touch screen. Next is the trigger type. In this case, we will use a flow trigger. And again, you have all these settings very similar to what you see on the 840, where you can change the respiratory rate, the tidal volume that you want to provide for this patient. Notice as you change the tidal volume, the mils per body weight is then reflected at the bottom left of the screen, and decide what flow you want to provide the volume control at. This tells you what your trigger sensitivity is. Usually we keep to 2 to 3 liters per minute. And here is your FiO2. Again, you can change it using the knob. Here is your PEEP. So generally we always tend to start at a minimum of PEEP of 5. And for this case, we will use a RAM instead of a square waveform for the inspiration. So once you're done, you can then press start to initiate ventilation. Okay, so now we have set up the ventilator and connected it to the patient. You will then be at this interface. So I'll just orientate you on the interface of the 980. Right at the bottom here are the settings that you have already set up for this patient. So you, as indicated here, you are on assist control, volume control, with a respiratory rate of 14, tidal volume of 320, with this flow, this sensitivity, FiO2, and PEEP. If you wish to change any of these numbers, you can use the touch screen and change it accordingly. So notice when I change the tidal volumes, as I increase the tidal volumes, this tidal volume per predicted body weight goes up as well. So this is quite a useful tool to tell you roughly how much are you ventilating the patient with. Once you're happy with any of the settings that you have decided to use, then you can accept all, and it will be changed immediately. Alternatively, you can also change the settings by pressing on this bottom left hand of the screen. This allows you to change, again, the various settings and also the mode of the ventilator if you wish to. If you want to change it, you can press accept all, but if you are not happy with your changes, you can press cancel and it goes back to the original. So right at the top here are the numbers, not the numbers that you set for the patient, but rather the numbers that the ventilator is sensing. So here the C represents controlled breaths, i.e. not triggered by the patient. The peak pressures measured are 21 with a tidal volume of 360, which is quite close to what you have set for this patient. You have the mean airway pressure, the respiratory rate, IE ratios, and minute ventilation, as well as the volume per predicted body weight. Notice the ETCO2 is available for the 980, but at the moment there's no number because we have not connected it up yet to the ETCO2 monitor. In the middle here are the waveforms for the ventilator. So this is the pressure waveform as well as the flow waveform. You can, if you wish to, change the outlook of the interface showing just numbers, but if you don't like this, you can always close it and it goes back to the interface with the waveforms. Right at the bottom are some additional tools, so you can provide 100% FiO2 for a short period of time. You can also change the ventilator alarm settings, and this shows up an interface very similar to the 840, where you can adjust your alarm thresholds accordingly. So once you're happy with all the alarm thresholds, you just press accept. You can also do inspiratory as well as expiratory pause maneuvers. So right here are where you can do the inspiratory hold. So if you want to, you just have to press it once. And here you notice that the ventilator automatically detects the plateau pressure, which is reflected over here, 16 centimeters water. And once you're done, you press close. Lastly, to set up the ETCO2 for the 980, you have this ETCO2 monitor which goes near to the patient end at the Y connector. It's difficult to simulate now, but once this is connected to the circuit, you can then set it up by pressing this toolbar here at the bottom right, going to options, and then CO2. And here it tells you to enable the capnography. The ventilator will then do some verification. Once it's verified, then you will be initiated to press the start button, and then the ETCO2 numbers should then be highlighted on the top of the screen.